Well, we've got a little system that is departing out of the Northeast tonight. We're going to take a look at that and look ahead to Friday, the weekend, and early next week. We've got maybe some severe weather risks to deal with along the way, but we've got some nice weather too. It continues hot across the usual places from Florida to Texas, and we also have some issues with thunderstorms, or we will have some issues with thunderstorms in and around the Great Lakes. So we'll talk all about that and more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, sand, and salt come winter time. So back the truck up and get everything you need to make your home look great, plus everything you need in case we get a tropical storm or hurricane. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number for the best prices in town, and the website is omnitruevalue.com. And Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And whether you purchase the weather station or any of the other weather electronic devices that they have, along with Weather Fashion, use the coupon code I want a weather station, and you get 10% off. Oh, good evening all to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, except we are minus Joe Rayo tonight. He had an engagement that he wasn't sure whether he was going to be attending it or not. Decided to attend it, and that left me all by my little lonesome. So I hope everybody had a great day. Mine was kind of interesting. Had a new shed put in, and then spent time arguing with the person who insisted on telling me that that was the color I picked when it wasn't. So that's one thing I have to deal with. And then I lost the shed keys, which took me an hour to find. I had to, I dropped them somehow. They fell out of my pocket while I was walking the dog. So thankfully I knew where I walked him and I was able to find it. So that really is the excitement that I had today. And also poured rain and thunderstorms overnight into this morning here in northeast Georgia. And rain that moved through parts of the Northeast is still moving, still there on the radar and about to move out. So we're going to check that out. Meanwhile, welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight, and welcome to those of you who are watching in the background on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We are on Monday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m., Sundays at 11 a.m., and if something happens on a Friday and Saturday, usually Joe and I are off on those 2 days. But if there's a storm brewing, you can be sure that we will both make adjustments and have a show on those days. All right, so why don't we get started tonight as we take a look at what's happening, and I'll get rid of me for now, and we'll start with tonight's satellite loop, which if you see in the Northeast, all the clouds that rolled through today with some rain and seeing a few lightning strikes showing up in parts of Delaware right now on the southern end of this, and also in eastern North Carolina. And I did even notice a special marine warning that was up for the south shore of Long Island, with the last of this moving away to the northeast. Fortunately, some areas did get heavy rains today, but it wasn't uniform. The radar this morning looked kind of blotchy, and it was pretty obvious that the models yesterday kind of overdid the rain to a general extent. But still, it did rain hard in a few places. I know around Philadelphia, for example, had some big downpours, and I saw some other downpours centered around New York City and Long Island. But again, that is moving along, which is good. And you see the system clears out rather quickly behind it. We've got a nice dome of dry air that's over the Great Lakes that's moving into the Northeast for Friday. And to the west of that, we've got another system that's coming out of the northern plains. So there's sort of this endless parade of systems that are dropping down out of Canada and moving along from west to east. So on the one hand, it's good that they're moving because at least you get whatever nasty weather you're going to get over a short period of time. Then you get a break for about a day and a half or so, and then you do it all over again with the next cold front. And these systems are all coming through with varying strengths and producing varying amounts of rainfall and showers and thunderstorms. Fortunately, it was not a whole lot of severe weather to deal with this. We've got some clouds and some thunderstorms going on in northern Arizona and New Mexico, spreading up into parts of Utah and Colorado. Got some showers and thunderstorms in central and south Florida, which is what you're supposed to have in this time of year. There's an upper low. If you look on the lower right, that's an upper low that is sitting over the easternmost Bahamas. It doesn't appear that this system is going to become any kind of tropical system. It's just going to play itself out, and most of that moisture is going to eventually get absorbed northwestward up into the east. It's not nothing really to write home about in terms of moisture. And you'll also see out in the west, it's really nice, sunny skies across much of northern California, northern Nevada, into the Pacific Northwest, except right along the coast of Washington State, where we've got a lot of clouds and some fog as some marine air has moved on in. And we'll check out the latest surface map. And a low is analyzed at 5 o'clock this afternoon, right on the Pennsylvania-New Jersey border in North Jersey, with a warm front to the south. And the dew points and the warmer temperatures in that warm sector. Well, it wasn't really much of a warm sector, really, with temperatures in the upper 70s to around 80, though the dew points were high. And to the north of that, uh, most temperatures, especially once it started raining, the temperatures kind of eased back a bit, which is what you would expect in a situation like this, where you're not getting that warm tropical air moving up the eastern seaboard. There's a secondary front that's back in approaching Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, and it's through southern Michigan. You can see the dew points in Michigan and Wisconsin are all in the 50s, and that's the air that is heading to the east, and that'll be in for Friday. Meanwhile, it was very warm and humid in the Ohio Valley, stationary frontal boundary across Tennessee and back through Arkansas and into North Texas. And of course, once again, if we look at these 5 p.m. Eastern Time temperatures, everybody's over 100. I mean, just about everyone is between 100 and 105. We've got even a couple of 110s out here in West Texas. So it remains very hot, even into southern New Mexico. Not too bad, though, in southern Arizona. Actually got a 99 there, so we've got only a two-digit number. I'm not sure what city that is, and there might be some elevation involved. But even Phoenix, for example, on here is 106, which is typical Phoenix. And you gain 100-degree readings also in Southern California, like around Palm Springs. But then, you get near the coast, and it's mostly upper 70s and low 80s with relatively low dew points. So it certainly is a lot easier to bear. Let's check out the radar tonight. And the rain is now over central and eastern Long Island. There's a little bit of a thunderstorm there, just south of Fire Island and West Hampton Beach that is moving eastward. Eastern Long Island's getting some much needed heavy rain because that's one of the few places in the Northeast that's on the dry side. The eastern half of Long Island not getting a whole lot this summer when it's come to these thunderstorms. A lot of them have just weakened as they moved eastward. We've got some rain in Massachusetts, in the Boston area, northern Connecticut, a couple of areas where the rain's coming down rather hard. You can see in the yellows there on the radar echoes, and they extend down into southeastern New England. And also seeing some heavy downpours and a couple of thunderstorms coming out of northeastern New York and now moving into Vermont, which is not good because of the fact that they've done nothing but rain all summer long, and they're getting more of it. A couple of severe thunderstorm warnings in coastal North Carolina, just on the edge of the Outer Banks, moving eastward. Other than that, it is pretty much radar free today. It wasn't this morning, but it is now across much of the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. You have to go all the way down to South Florida to start to see some showers and storms, and you also have a few of them rolling through parts of northern Mississippi. Little batch of thunderstorms and some severe thunderstorm warnings popping up in the yellow boxes in central Texas. This is another area with that big ridge out there. They haven't seen much in the way of rain and thunderstorms this summer season. And we've got clusters of showers and thunderstorms and some severe weather in parts of Arizona. And you see the yellow boxes popping up there, as well as some scattered showers in central Oklahoma, also in parts of the Dakotas and Nebraska, getting a little more active in eastern South Dakota with those showers and thunderstorms. And this is the risk area for severe weather tonight. Now, much of what's in the Northeast is either played out or already playing out, or in the process of playing out. Marginal risk was put up by SPC, the Storm Prediction Center, into southeastern New England to about New York City, back over into western New Jersey. Anytime you see a marginal risk, think isolated severe thunderstorms. Don't think widespread thunderstorm activity. Usually it's isolated severe thunderstorms. And the slight risk, southeast Virginia and eastern North Carolina. The radar shows most of those are on the coast now and moving out, so that's pretty much done. And the marginal risk that you see across the areas from South Carolina west into Mississippi, not really doing very much at the moment. We've got a slight risk in that area in South Dakota where we're seeing some severe weather there. And also into northeast Nebraska, larger area of marginal risk encompasses that in the northern and central plains. Also, the marginal risk for that area of storms in central Texas, not showing any risk, even though they are seeing some severe weather in parts of Arizona, but they do have general thunderstorms there. Now, the Storm Prediction Center for tomorrow, Friday, no thunderstorms in most of the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic, with the exception of Maine, where they have them in general thunderstorms. We have a marginal risk in the southeast, and then pushing westward to about Mississippi. And then you have this large area of marginal and slight risk in over the western Great Lakes, into the upper Mississippi Valley, and even into the middle Mississippi and the Missouri River Valley in that slight risk zone. A 2% tornado risk tomorrow in northern Illinois and eastern Iowa, northeastern Missouri, and southern Wisconsin. And for day 3, now this is Saturday when we'll have a weather front approach. And SBC only updates the day 3 forecast. They put it out in the evening, in the morning, and in the early morning hours, and then they really don't change it until tomorrow. So I didn't expect them to do anything with this, but we've got a marginal risk for the southern half of New York State into southern and central New England, west-southwestward through Pennsylvania. It becomes a slight risk in Ohio, southern Indiana, and northern Kentucky. Otherwise, areas of general thunderstorms, another marginal risk area in North Texas to southwest Kansas and southeastern Colorado and over the Oklahoma Panhandle. Much of the West is doing okay. You can see, again, this is just sort of typical August fare. And on the rainfall forecast map, now this starts at 8 o'clock this evening and goes to Saturday evening. So I've got a 2-day and I have a 7-day. So we'll do the 2-day first. And you'll notice that over the next couple of days, and this will take us through Saturday evening. So a little bit of precip here being indicated by any thunderstorm. So they're not particularly bullish on heavy rainfall in general, although we all know that under a thunderstorm, if you're sitting under it, you could get clobbered, but it's very localized. But nothing major here to speak of. In the southeast, we've got patches of 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches from Georgia back to Mississippi. Also in South Florida. Same goes up the Mississippi Valley all the way up into Minnesota, and then eastward across Michigan, northern Michigan, and even into southern Michigan and northern Ohio. And also seeing some rain from the monsoon creeping up into the southwest. Now, if we took it to 7 days, the 7-day rainfall amounts are ample because we have another system to deal with on Monday. And you'll notice that it's basically 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches. Some heavy rains being forecast for the upper peninsula of Michigan of up to several inches. 1.5 inches for the lower peninsula, 1.5 inches plus for the lower peninsula. And then 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches just about everywhere else in the Ohio Valley, kind of nosing into the Tennessee Valley. Then there's a bit of a gap, and then they've got 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches patches in central and south Georgia, central and south Alabama, down into Florida, and then South Florida with a little bit of tropical moisture there showing up to several inches, and also 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches in parts of the Southwest, thanks to the our friend the monsoon. So let's look first. Let's look at the upper air here and take a look at what we got tonight, which is for this time of year, an unusually strong flow from Canada that actually extends out from the Pacific, runs into the Pacific Northwest, runs across the country, and exits out off the northeast coast. We've got an upper low over the south of James Bay. We've got another upper low west of Lake Winnipeg. There's yet another upper low up in northern Hudson Bay. So we have some Canada connections here. And as a result, we're getting some of that dry air funneling southward, which is what we're going to see for Friday. We don't have at the moment any kind of, say, a full latitude trough that goes all the way down to Florida to bring that dry air down into the southeastern part of the United States, for example. Now, we might get a glance of it early next week, and as we run through the upper air of the system for tonight, obviously lifts out and leaves us in a good spot tomorrow. Then we've got a kind of a weakish short wave that comes in for Saturday. It's hard to see. It's just a little bit of a dent in the flow, but it might be enough to set off some scattered thunderstorms in the Northeast and northern Mid-Atlantic states for late Saturday to Saturday evening. I think it's going to be one of these deals where some people will get them, some people won't. We saw that the risk area is being indicated as marginal, and then we have that system coming into the northwest that dives down into the Great Lakes and cuts off and then lifts up into eastern Canada. Now this one is for Monday, and sorry about that. Sometimes when I go solo, for some reason my microphone will shut off, and I don't know why because I'm still talking. But that trough looks sharper, but there's some changes that have occurred in terms of, we often look at these things with a certain amount of repetitiveness in the sense that, we were talking yesterday, this looked a lot like the system that we had back on Monday, but there are some differences here. And that might be the reason why the models have kind of backed off on the idea that maybe there'll be up and down showers and thunderstorms all the way down. The trough, this trough, and is looking at Tuesday, does get fairly far south down into southern Georgia. So that at least will probably bring drier air behind it for a couple of days next week, which is nice. And the heat ridge is still back from Texas into the southwest, but it's more to the east than it has been for a good part of the summer. We also have another upper high that's off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, and that actually is creating ridging here, which is creating that Canadian connection that we've been talking about. Well, that trough Tuesday is going to lift out, and then we're going to have the upper low strengthen again in eastern Canada. So that'll keep the hot air away. And after that, the GFS continues to try to lift it out, although it leaves some of it in eastern Canada. We're kind of on the edge of it as we get into the week beginning Sunday, August 20th. So if this upper air were to verify, it certainly would suggest that the areas here just to the south of the Northeast will get hot with a big upper high sitting overhead. And then you've got a weak trough off along the west coast and then a weak trough that's off the coast of the Northeast. So the Canada connection gets pulled up northward a little bit. How long it lasts, I don't know. The ridge looks like it wants to flatten out, and then as we go to the longer term, that express train of trough after trough coming down from Canada resumes. So if we do get a break, we may or may not get hot here. We will get hot probably in the middle and South Atlantic states and points west for a few days. Not that it hasn't been, but the really super continuous 90-degree weather has really been confined to the areas uh, along the southern half of those states in Georgia and Alabama. Then it kind of broadens out a little bit further north into Mississippi, and then of course all across through Texas and into the Southwest. There's no sign of any trough dropping down to Texas to get rid of this ridge completely, which would get rid of the heat. And you'll notice on the in the center of the picture on the bottom, there are two Pacific hurricanes here that the models develop and move out to the northwest and eventually just die out. The first one you see there, then the second one comes on the scene. Looks like it might be turning more westerly toward the end of the forecast period, but we don't see much in the Atlantic with this run. And part of the issues with what's going on in the North Atlantic is the fact that uh, the waves that have been coming off the African coast have not been very robust. So as we run through this, you'll notice that narrow east-west ridge that's sitting. This is part of that Texas ridge here that extends out into the Atlantic. And you've got this storminess here near the Azores. There's another deep low that's east of Newfoundland. So we've got this sort of very narrow subtropical ridge, but there's not a whole lot in terms of a push that's coming off the African coast at the moment. There are a couple of waves that are going to be coming out, but when we at least run it through the upper air, we don't see much development. We do see bridging starting from uh, the area from the Mediterranean Sea starts to build westward across the Atlantic, and you get a little bit of strengthening there of the subtropical ridge, but it's narrow. It's not pushed all the way up. It's just kind of narrow as it sits out in the Atlantic. And you also can see that trough that's approaching the eastern part of the United States. This is on Tuesday, and going forward, the upper high does start to strengthen as you get a deep trough moving over James Bay, and on it goes. I mean, in fact, it actually after that it weakens the subtropical ridge as this next trough dives off of Newfoundland here. So with no real push and no real strong high out in the Atlantic, it's a little problematic for these waves to move westward. We may have to start thinking about the fact that these systems, that when they start to develop, maybe they'll start to develop closer to the islands, or maybe closer to the United States, or the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps, or even the Northwest Caribbean. But for now, there's not a whole lot happening here, and we can even they'll put the surface map on so you can take a look at what that shows. And other than weak lows, I'll run it backwards, and then you go forward. You see the showers there along the African coast. There's a couple of lows that come out of there, but they don't seem to do very much, at least on the GFS. On the lower left, you see the system that eventually becomes a hurricane in the Pacific. But in the Atlantic, these waves are on the weakish side as they move along to the west. Now, right around August 22nd, there's something near the Cabo Verde Islands, but even here, the EFS doesn't really do not really showing anything spinning up in the longer term. And I've mentioned the fact that the European at day 10 actually has what looks like a tropical storm sitting at about 21 north and 43 west. But if you notice, because of the fact that the subtropical ridge is weak, that system starts moving northward fairly early. So unless there's some kind of strong, strengthening of the upper ridge to turn it back westward, if that is real, you could just probably count that as maybe an ocean storm. And then there's another system that comes off at the end of the period off the African coast, sitting over the Cabo Verde Islands. So the European seems to want to be hinting at the possibility that we could see some tropical cyclone development, maybe in about 10 days or so, or 9 or 10 days. But other than that, it remains calm. Oddly enough, the Weather Service actually increased their forecast today for the hurricane season. Now they've gotten 5 out of the way, because you have to count the one in January, so that leaves them with either another 9 to 15 more storms. So if they're going to reach that upper end number, since we're a third of the way through the month of August with no sign of anything developing through at least the 15th, if not maybe the 17th. So if you're going to try to reach those top numbers, you're going to have we're going to have it like last year then, where we'll suddenly go from no storms to 6 of them. So bear that in mind, because last year we had nothing in the month of August at all, and then suddenly in September it just exploded in development. And I was a little surprised too at the fact that they did up their forecast, if only because of the fact that we do have a developing El Nino But apparently it's not. It's a bit underwhelming at the moment. So perhaps the atmosphere has not really grasped onto the concept that we do have an El Nino out there, which is supposed to lead to subdued tropical cyclone development in the Atlantic. So they're kind of going against that. We'll see if they're going to be right or wrong. So since I'm on the European, let's look at early next week and take a look. I like to use that 700 millibar, the 10,000 foot level, so we can take a look at these systems that are coming through. And you see the one for today. Little indentations in the flow, a little shortwave trough there, a little shortwave trough there, but doesn't have that, that V shape. It's not lifting up in a negative tilt or anything like that. So this is tonight's system, just moves along, and then we get drier tomorrow, and then Saturday there's a short wave. You see that upper low in the northern Great Lakes over Lake Michigan, so that sort of explains that explains why the WPC folks are forecasting big rains up there. Well, most of the energy with that is to the north, but there are a few jet streaks there in the yellows. Nothing in particularly strong, but there are a few jet streaks showing up in parts of New York State and Pennsylvania, and then that pulls out into southeastern Canada, and now here comes what looks like more of a powerhouse in Minnesota that moves across the lakes over Michigan. Again, this is why the northern lakes is seeing all the heavy rain in the WPC forecast. The difference, I think, now, if you notice as this rolls along, yeah, there's some jet streaks, but they're not nearly as pronounced as yesterday. And the reason for that is the shape of this trough on the European is instead of having a sharp, say, V shape with the trough, it's a sort of a broad, almost like a bowl, okay, and that essentially spreads the energy out rather than having it concentrated like it would if you had a V-shaped trough there. So that could be the reason why the models have backed off somewhat, or at least the European has not been overly bullish, while the other models have with regards to Monday. That lifts out, and then you see yet another trough at the end of next week that comes into the northeast before that starts to lift away northeastward up into Canada. Now we could go to the GFS, and we'll take a look at this model, see what that does now for Monday, because the GFS was pretty dynamic. And again, same concept today with this sort of weakish shortwave moving through. Then we get to Saturday afternoon. You see those jet streaks with that upper low that's north of Lake Huron, and that moves along. And now you've got the diving cutoff into Michigan. Now, see, the GFS has got a bit more, and I think this probably makes more sense. You can see more jet streaks here on the GFS, but yesterday they were kind of in a line, whereas today they're more in an east-west fashion. And I think this implies, in my mind, that this is going to be maybe another one of these warm front, cold front scenarios. And we're going to have to wait to see how far north the warm front gets and who gets warm sectored, because that'll ultimately determine who winds up seeing severe weather out of this. And then, of course, that lifts out, and then we've got another broad trough coming through for the end of the week before the GFS wants to pull the jet further to the north. And if we take a look at the surface, so this is tonight. We are seeing our weather system. You got the rain up in Vermont and New Hampshire, just exiting eastern Long Island. By 2 a.m., it's just about gone except for Maine and southeastern New England. You got showers and storms up in Minnesota, and that leaves us with a northwest wind tomorrow and sunshine. It'll be in the 80s. The isobars relax, the pressure gradient relaxes as we go into Friday night and Saturday, and then the approaching system for Saturday. You see how the model has a sort of east-west look for thunderstorms for Saturday evening. Most of them seem to be inland across northern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, into Connecticut, and then it's got a little patch that goes over at 1 o'clock, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning over New York City and Long Island. I don't know how real that is. Sunday looks good, and then you notice out to the west in the plains, here comes that next system with the upper low, and you'll see how the precip is lined up here Monday afternoon. This is a signature, really, of a here's your cold front, and there's some kind of warm front here. So it appears now that the GFS anyway is suggesting that we'll get some pretty warm frontal rain and some thunderstorms and maybe some heavy downpours Monday morning into the afternoon. But the warm sector is going to set up further south if that's the case. And you see where the thunderstorm, you get that big cluster of thunderstorms in North Carolina and some in Virginia. That's where your maybe your potential for severe weather is going to wind up being further south this time around. We'll just have to wait and see. The front comes through during the overnight. We dry out on Tuesday, and then we've got another front that approaches on for Thursday, and on it goes. And with respect to the dew points, take a look here, because we all want low dew points, don't we? So here's tomorrow. By tomorrow morning, the dew points will be dropping, and then they really drop off during the day. You got that very large area of dark green, all dew points in the 50s and even some 40s. Excuse me. And there's still some leftover low dew points Saturday morning. The dew points come up in the afternoon ahead of that cold front. They get up into the mid 60s. They drop off a bit on Sunday, and then they start to come back up on Monday. In fact, by Monday afternoon, the dew point in northern New Jersey, for example, and in east central PA, above 70. So we'll have to see how far north this warm front gets. If you look at the dew point map, it kind of implies that that warm front gets, rather tries to get pretty far to the north. Certainly the 70 dew points push their way up into southern New England, and you've got 70 dew points all the way back across Pennsylvania and into Ohio and down into Kentucky. And now we go into Tuesday when we wait for the cold front to pass, and then here we go again, another shot of some drier air with dew points dropping down into the 50s. And of course, now with this trough for early next week going all the way down into Georgia, you can see the low dew points that get down into the northern half of Georgia, almost down to 50 in what looks like I think that's by probably Athens, Georgia, where that 50 is, or Gainesville. And they are in the 50s for Tuesday night and Wednesday. And in the Northeast, beautiful dew points coming in for, not quite Tuesday morning, but Tuesday afternoon, but particularly Tuesday night and Wednesday. Wednesday of next week, if this verifies, is going to be a really nice dry day. And we're still holding on to some lower dew points even on Thursday with another front approaching. And for Friday, they really don't start to come up again until we get into the weekend of the 19th and 20th, particularly Sunday the 20th. And this is where, of course, if the GFS is correct, you're going to pull that jet all the way up into Canada and start to bring in the humidity back up. Although in New England, since we're kind of on the edge of that jet, there's actually drier air when you go into upstate New York and New England, assuming it plays out that way. And we don't know that it's going to that far down the road. But again, this has been at least from my standpoint, this has been a very interesting summer in a lot of respects. The heat waves have been there. They've been extreme geographically. They have been confined to those areas for long periods of time. Many areas in the Northeast have not been able to string together more than 2 days of 90-degree plus weather. 3 is what the Weather Service considers a heat wave. I used to think it used to be 5. I always liked the 5, but that's me. And I think Joe Rayo used to also like the 5. So that pretty much covers it. Glad to see Miss Fallerite on the chat board. Nice to see you. And hope all is well. Hope all goes well for you. And you notice, folks, it's always good to hit the subscribe button and use your Gmail account. You want to participate in the conversation, or if you're a little shy, just leave a comment on the video itself, and I usually get to them. I mean, I get to them on the same day, but they usually get to them. How unusual is it for Hawaii, asked Johnny Quest, to have wildfires when Hawaii's in the tropics? Well, I'm betting, and this has a lot to do with Hurricane Dora that went so far to the south. There's a very strong high. There's a very strong ridge out in the Pacific, and that's creating strong northeast winds, and that also creates a lot of downslope from the mountains and from the volcanoes. So if you're on the south side, the southeast side of those the elevations, which most of the bigger cities in Hawaii are, you're getting very very dry air, and Hawaii. I don't know if those of you who haven't been to Hawaii, they have a rainy season. This is not it. Okay, Hawaii is in the tropics, but they have a very relatively calm climate. Hurricanes tend to die off before they get there when they start off in the East Pacific and move westward. This one uh, moved was very far to the south, the Hurricane Dora, which, by the way, is going to cross the international date line tomorrow. So let's give that a quick look. But all that that downsloping wind is a problem, and not getting much rain to begin with. That's drier air, even more dry air to deal with. So they were at a point where they had red flag warnings up. So Hurricane Dora, they're so far west now. This is so far west that Hawaii is off to the right off the map. So 180 east is the international date line, and right now Dora is at Did it again. Don't know why it does that. Dora was at 12.7 north, 173.0 west. Maximum sustained winds of 120 miles per hour, moving west northwest at 20. So it's still a major hurricane. It is forecast. It is forecast across the date line tomorrow morning, and then on the other side, goes from being a major hurricane to a hurricane. There is shear that occurs. That's going to occur, and they do have it weakening to a tropical storm and eventually into a remnant tropical depression once it gets to about 165 east. We've seen this happen from time to time over the years, and when it does happen where they cross the date line, they don't they most of the time they die out. They don't go all the way across. I don't recall a hurricane going all the way across from the East Pacific and going into the West Pacific as a typhoon and making landfall someplace like the Philippines or Japan or China. Usually, in that part of the Pacific, there's enough going on in the upper atmosphere, particularly when they're already up at 20 north, that they start dealing with upper lows that are out there, and they wind up getting uh, sheared apart. Chuck Cardillo says, I did agree to job soloing. Much appreciated. Thank you. Yes, Chuck, thank you. Sure. I'm not used to doing I used to do a solo show when I first started doing this, and I've gotten to where I'm not used to doing it anymore. I do a solo show so infrequently that it's not easy. It's when I first started doing this, I was doing it by myself, so it was easier. If you wanted, I got the satellite here. Let me just get myself out of the way so you can take a look. On the lower left, you can see where Hawaii is. And on the lower left is Hurricane Dora. It still has that symmetric annular look to it. Not annual, but annular. Uh, it's got that, very symmetric look as opposed to most hurricanes, which tend to be asymmetrical. Also notice uh, look at all the clouds. This is the way the Atlantic should look, okay, with regards to tropical waves, because you have a very active uh, intertropical convergence zone in the Pacific here, where you've got these waves and tons of moisture here, with waves moving westward. This is also one of the things we'll have to look for too. And this may happen, maybe in another month or so. Um, Hawaii, if they're going to get a hurricane, usually it's from something that develops to their south or to their southwest and moves northeastward. So in La Nina years, they usually don't see tropical cyclone development at all. in the Hawaiian Islands. They've got their own name list for storms that form in the East Central Pacific. So this might be a year with a budding El Nino that maybe we'll see a cyclone develop south of the Hawaiian Islands. But I'll get the Atlantic. Let's just look at the Atlantic tropics on the wide view. And by the way, there's another issue now that I have the Atlantic up. You saw what was out in the Pacific. Take a look at the Atlantic. I mean, it's far less. There's so little going on. There's some action off the African coast and then going westward about halfway across. But relatively speaking, it's quiet. It also, here's another problem. These waves are, we had this problem last August where you want to see the axis of the clouds at about 10 degrees north. Okay? These are somewhere, the equator is somewhere about here. So, I mean, these are actually down at about 5 degrees north, which is too far south for them to spin up. So that's a problem. There is a stronger wave that looks like it's coming off. Maybe that's what the European has picked up on. But notice on the visible, on the visible satellite loop, on the visible part of the satellite loop before it goes dark, right off the coast here is Africa. Oh, that gray shading. You think about the smoke and what it looks like on the what it looked like on the satellite of the United States. Well, that's Saharan dust that's coming off, and that may also pose a problem if it gets entrained into any of these tropical waves that move eastward. So for now, the Atlantic tropics continue to have what I think we could call issues with respect to tropical cyclone development. So I think we're going to wrap it up. I don't know. I disappeared. Where did I go? That's me. There you go. All right. Now I'll just go out for a moment and remind everybody that the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board and it's on the descriptor to this video. If you do decide to make a purchase, use the coupon code Joe and Joe. The coupon code I want a weather station, and you will get 10% off your purchase. And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. OmniTrueValue.com is the website. And let's see, Frank Karajat or Karajat. What part of the day on Monday do you think the clouds and rain might move in? Well, if it winds up being a warm front, cold front, we could have rain going on Monday morning, during the morning, and then you'll have to see if the warm front gets far enough north and does the sun break through in the clouds, or is it going to be low? Is it going to be cloudy with low clouds all day? That's going to be key to whether there's any kind of stronger thunderstorms later on. But if it's looking like it's more of a warm front, cold front combination, then we'll probably have rain kind of like what we had today, and it'll come in Monday morning, timing-wise, maybe around or just after daybreak. But it's still Thursday night, so we'll kind of square the timing on that over the weekend. And thank you, Carol DeCara. I tried. So we'll see you Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And Joe will be here, and so will I. So have a great evening and enjoy your weekend. We'll see you on Sunday. Good night.